My name is Jason Swanson. I work as the Director of Strategic Foresight with KnowledgeWorks, and I am honored to be joined by my colleague, Catherine Prince, Vice President of Strategic Foresight, and to really share our work um, around our newest publication on human-centered learning with you all. So for those of you who may not be familiar with KnowledgeWorks, we are a national nonprofit really dedicated to the notion of creating the future of learning together. So we work deeply within the system of education, uh, thinking through what futures of learning might look like, to advocate for transformational policy, and to work hand in hand with learning communities as they work to scale up personalized competency-based learning. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be taking a quick tour of our newest publication called Envisioning Human-Centered Learning Systems. Our goal today is to get you some information both about the publication, so how we define human-centered learning, some of the importance that we see around things like aspirational visions of the future, and to highlight a few strategies, and of course, to take your questions. So as we work our way through the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to add those to the chat, and we'll be sure to respond as we're able to at the end of the session. So I want to start this off really with a question. I think it's the question right now as we look at a lot of disruptive change. And that's really this notion of, what do you want for the future of learning? And I'd like to invite you, as we work through this presentation, to add your thinking and to really describe your own vision for the future of learning using adjectives to the chat box. And I want to encourage you to be as bold as possible as you work to really to both imagine and to describe what your own visions of the future of learning are. So with that said, I'm going to give a really, really quick primer on futures thinking. So at KnowledgeWorks, I'm very proud to be part of a team of four very, very talented futurists. We are blessed to be able to explore long-range futures for learning and for education. And what you see here on screen, it's something called the cone of plausibility. It's not really a foresight method, but it is a fantastic foresight teaching tool. And it's used to do a few things. But for our purposes, it's to describe this idea that the future is many, but not one. A lot of times, futurists will refer to what we call like the 3 Ps. So those include plausible futures. These are things that, if we look at the bounds of uncertainty and change, um, have maybe a decent chance of happening. We have possible futures. This, of course, means anything could happen. And indeed, anything could happen. I could win the lottery. It's probably not likely, but it is possible. And then our third P is, it's my favorite P. It's the preferable future. It's the vision. So the major difference here is we might say that plausible and possible futures really deal with inbound change. We're making assumptions about that change. We're thinking about what kind of futures they might create. Preferable futures, on the other hand, are more soundly rooted in outbound change. This is what we want to happen. This is how we're going to respond to those changes. So rather than be more rooted in assumption, they're more rooted in our values. They're signaling to the world what we want from the future, similar to the question that I asked you when we opened this up. And they're really acting as a North Star. So as we navigate change, how are we going to adapt our plans and design new offerings to bring us closer to those visionary futures? Now, for us, this new publication acts in part as a manifesto of sorts. It describes our version for learning. And in that we really need educational futures that are radically different than what we're seeing today. So our vision for human-centered learning really is one that provides each child and adult involved in education with the opportunities and supports they need really to thrive. So we need to align educational structures, policies, practices, and learning experiences around the flourishing and well-being of people, while cultivating responsibility for both society and for the planet. So this new vision really promises to help us navigate really what we would describe as an era shift that's underway. So for the past 6+ years, we've really been describing something we call a big story of change. We've framed this as an era shift in that we're looking at really, really deep structural changes. And there are a multitude of reasons for this, ranging from exponential advances in technology, certainly accelerating social change, looking at things like climate volatility. So it's always important from our point of view to have a very clear understanding of that vision of what we want from the future. But we believe it's especially important in times of deep disruption to, one, interrogate the visions that we hold to make sure that in the face of scrutiny, they still hold up, and to really work as a way, again, as that North Star to chart a path through disruption so we can think critically about how we're going to channel our energies and resources to create that future. So I'm going to step back and I'm going to invite Catherine to.
Jason, you just went on mute for just a second there.
I'm going to invite Catherine in to, thank you, Kate, to really begin a deeper dive into some of these aspects that we call human-centered learning.
Thank you, Jason. As we explored human-centered learning, which had been a possibility or provocation we raised in a forecast that we were excited about and wanted to understand better, we came up with 4 vision elements. And the first of those is that human-centered learning would help liberate young people to participate fully in society, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexuality, disability, immigration status, or other factors. When we interviewed folks in education and in disciplines related to our exploration of human-centered learning, they described this element as helping learners develop a growing understanding of their identity and of their purpose and agency, and that they would do that through engagement, reflection, and expression. So a really important dimension of this vision element is critical consciousness, or a learner's deep understanding of the interplay between their self-concept and society. We came to understand that engaging in critical civic inquiry about how societal structures and processes create systems of power, privilege, and oppression can help learners understand how systemic structures frame and perpetuate societal issues. And it can also help them explore how they might act to change those structures and to create more equitable and sustainable societal outcomes. When we look to the future, we identify signals of change or early indicators that show how future possibilities are beginning to unfold today. And so 2 signals of change illustrate how work is underway to provide students opportunities to develop their agency and critical consciousness, working toward this possibility of being liberated to participate fully in society. And the first of those signals is City Bridges High School. Based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it integrates a student-led and project-based curriculum with a foundation of mindfulness. Students cultivate their agency by participating in all school committees and governance structures, and also by contributing to community-based projects. They also engage in daily meditation and in training and practices of loving kindness, empathy, and benevolence, which serve the school's goal of transforming the world into a measurably more positive place. In another example, the nonprofit Community Works Institute focuses on developing students as active citizens who are empowered to use critical inquiry and creative problem solving to improve their communities. So the Institute partners with educators across the US to help them reimagine their teaching practice and their relationships with students through the lenses of place-based service learning, sustainability, and social justice. Moving on to the next vision element, it calls for schools to organize for love and belonging. As we explored human-centered learning, we came to understand that it's fundamentally care-based. It would need to cultivate love and belonging for students, as well as for the many adults who play a part in students' learning journeys. Companionate love, which is defined as feelings of affection, compassion, caring, and tenderness for others, would provide the supportive conditions for healthy neurological growth and secure attachment. which are key in buffering against the various stressors that learners face. So the goal of this dimension of human-centered learning is to provide every learner with the security and reliability of a safe and supportive base of care from which they can own their learning and engage confidently with the world. Schools that organize for love and belonging would also create new systems and model relationships that didn't perpetuate trauma or inequity. In addition, learning communities with this orientation would prioritize their supports for educators. Those would need to include high quality professional learning experiences, but they would also include shared power, support for risk taking, and also professional respect. Having this kind of foundation of emotional security promises to help learners, educators, and families contribute to others' well-being, while also developing the creativity, confidence, and inclusive practices necessary for them to face life's uncertainties, as well as its challenges and opportunities. So 2 examples again illustrate how some education organizations are beginning to prioritize love and belonging today. In an effort to scale up social emotional learning, states such as Connecticut have been working to integrate holistic social emotional learning and cultural competence among schools, health agencies, and other student service organizations. These programs are also aiming to support teachers in developing their social emotional skills so that they have support in becoming more resilient and in developing their ability to listen to and support each child with compassion. In another example, Dr. Howard Stevenson of the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education works nationally with schools, educators, and parents to develop racial literacy skills that help them identify, read, and recast stressful racial encounters. His approach leverages in-the-moment therapeutic play, storytelling, and emotion navigation skills to resolve stress and promote healing. The third vision element of human-centered learning articulates the need for leadership to be intentionally inclusive and co-creative. Human-centered learning ecosystems, if they came to exist, would have leadership structures and processes that were actively inclusive of many forms of difference. They would intentionally promote interdependence, shared power, and co-creation among all stakeholders. This kind of leadership would aim to cultivate a dense network of connections to dismantle inequitable systems and structures. This shared leadership would go beyond simply consulting with people or seeking support for an institutional path. It needs to involve resetting relationships with learners, families, and communities, and then authentically including them in decision-making from that point forward. One interviewee with whom we spoke described this approach as a shift from a traditional hierarchical leadership roles to more horizontal partnerships that encourage distributed power and innovation. In a human-centered learning system, all educators would also be able to act as leaders at the same time that they were encouraging participation and leadership from students, parents, community members, and colleagues. And another dimension is that education organizations would build co-creative relationships with other agencies and institutions that are working to address students' and families' needs. For example, they might collaborate with organizations addressing health, housing, food, transportation, or environmental justice to build webs of support and to solve shared problems collectively. A couple of current examples show how some stakeholders are already engaging in collaborative activities to address the reality that the needs of children, youth, and their families span institutions. In the first, the whole school, whole community, whole child model is a framework for addressing health in schools. It was devised by the Centers for Disease Control and ASCD, and it focuses on the link between health and academic achievement, and is structured to help communities and states support schools and learner health. In another example, the Othering Institute, which is a nonprofit based at the University of California, Berkeley, works with stakeholders to identify and eliminate barriers to improving young people's prospects. They also work to promote inclusion and to enhance and sustain equitable policies and programs. the Institute uses a targeted universalism approach to develop leaders' capacity to identify group-specific solutions to shared challenges. The fourth and last element of our vision for human-centered learning is for learning to become a lifelong personal practice. This means that every student would be supported in developing personal routines, practices, and habits for tackling learning needs and fulfilling their aspirations. We know that everyone's going to need to pursue lifelong learning, especially given the need for ongoing reskilling and upskilling as people move through their careers amid a rapidly changing employment landscape. Developing an intentional and self-directed practice of learning and growth promises to help children and youth develop the agency and also the skills needed to push through learning plateaus, acquire and grow additional skills, and achieve their goals. It can also help them build useful learning support systems beyond what just may be given to them at school or in some other setting, and it can set the foundation for lifelong learning. Approaching learning as a lifelong personal practice has implications for both the design of learning experiences and assessment. Assessment will need to shift from providing comparative and relatively reductive views of learners' knowledge and skills to depicting rich portraits of their behaviors, practices, and habits. And both learning experiences and assessments will need to be informed by supportive developmental conversations with teachers and the other adults who serve as peers and mentors and guides. Those conversations would focus on helping students discover their motivation for learning as well as their most effective practices. Personalized learning provides an excellent starting point for making these kinds of shifts. And human-centered learning would push even further by overhauling education systems to revolve around the children, youth, and adults who occupy them. Again, here there are a couple of signals of change that illustrate ways in which students are gaining more autonomy in directing, planning, and assessing their own learning today. In one, an independent high school in Cleveland, Ohio, called the Mastery School of Hawken, focuses on cultivating students' lifelong learning practices. It combines opportunities for real-world problem solving and personalized mentoring relationships, along with a mastery transcript view of the learner's strengths and experiences. In another example, the long-established EL Education Network supports students in taking ownership of their work. Students engage in real-world project-based learning expeditions, they complete self-directed assessments, and they deepen their relationships with the natural world and communities through service. So in exploring the promise of human-centered learning, we identified 4 strategies that seem viable for helping people bring these vision elements to life and really not just make specific bits and pieces of change, but really undertake the systemic change that we're describing. And the first strategy is to model learning as a personal practice, which would mean helping learners really see and what it means to have a learning practice and to develop and help them develop the skills needed to keep pursuing learning beyond the classroom and across their lifetimes. So expanding the assessments to include rubrics and reflective prompts is one way of doing that. And performance-based and self-directed assessments are also maybe a broader way of helping students take ownership of their learning. Creating learning practice portfolios can also help students assess how they learn and examine the daily routines and strategies that support their learning. The second strategy is to prioritize relational competencies as essential skills. So relational competencies include social emotional skills, racial literacy, and cultural navigation skills. So together they support educator and learner practices that we see as being essential for driving human-centered learning. So I think a big area of action here is for schools, districts, and other organizations to help individuals and organizations in our education systems build capacity in this area. And they can also work to design supports for educators' personal and professional self-care across their careers. The third strategy is to co-create with learners authentic experiences that build their agency and impact and reflect their spheres of concern. This kind of learning can provide students with opportunities to contribute actively to their communities. Whether or not it does, integrating critical inquiry into learning experiences can help students examine issues and also analyze the assumptions, values, and power structures at play. In addition, working to build learners and educators' social capital can help both groups have access to the people and organizations that can contribute to authentic and impactful learning experiences. The fourth and last strategy is to build organizational connections for equitable responses. So building connections with other social systems and institutions can help stakeholders unravel structures of oppression and inequity and enable all students to access relevant and equitable opportunities for learning and development. These connections will be most valuable where the contributors' combined efforts add up to more than those of any single entity. And it will be important to build open channels of communication and co-creation with the people organizations are aiming to serve. Lastly, developing relationally competent leadership will be essential for ensuring inclusion in systems and processes and for distributing power. So with that quick overview of our vision for human-centered learning and supportive strategies, Jason and I would like to turn now to your questions about our ideas or about other things that they spark for you.
Catherine, two that I've seen in the chat. One is, why is human-centered learning particularly important now? And another, and I'm going to try to summarize a little bit, but I know it's something you wrestled with in the text, which is, how do you balance caring for humans, but also caring for the world and the environment?
Thank you. I mean, I think I view human-centered learning as being particularly important at this time because we're well aware that our education systems just aren't doing enough to support learners and aren't set up and resourced in the ways we need them to support learners. And the COVID-19 pandemic in particular has, I think, raised to a broader consciousness the inequities and the longstanding shortfalls that our systems have been struggling with. So we need to imagine new possibilities for the learners who are affected by education systems today. And we also need to be getting ready to have learning better support people for a very different world. In terms of how to balance caring for humans and the planet, we see those as very interconnected. I think that this vision for human-centered learning doesn't mean to be exclusive to humans, but rather means to be more holistic. So we're thinking about well-being very broadly, both for people and then for the planet. And part of what human-centered learning would aim to do is to help learners have the kind of societal and planetary consciousness so that they and others are also contributing more effectively to those big societal and global issues.
Yeah, and Catherine, to an additional detail for particularly the second question, is that this isn't, an either or question, or rather an either or response, and that if we're going to be really, really serious about orienting systems around people and orienting them around justice and equity, then we have to recognize intersectionality, in that to care for a person in this mode means to care for the planet as well, right? So the answer moves from either or to both and.
Mm-hmm.
We have two more questions. One was an ask to go a little bit deeper into relationships and the quality of relationships. So I'm going to read from the question. Can you go deeper into relationships? The reciprocity of relationships seems to be missing. What are your thoughts on the quality of relationships? And then there's another question about the balance of the momentum with technology, and to add technology into, I would say, all aspects of our life right now.
In regard to relationships, I agree they would need to be reciprocal. And I think that's part of what we're hoping to get at in highlighting the need for both individuals and organizations to develop greater skill and relational competency, both in terms of just day-to-day interactions and at the leadership level. I think the relationships are, of course, central to the teaching and learning exchange or enterprise. And we need to develop skills in being able to be effective in building those relationships across difference and across different points in learners' lives.
Kate, can you restate the second question?
Yes, let me see. How do we balance the momentum to technology? So just to incorporate technology into just about everything in education against personalized learning, recognizing, confirming, and supporting personal dispositions and aspirations.
Oh, both are excellent questions. And thank you. So I think this gets back, at least for me, when we look at sort of this tech infusion, if we look at the uncertainty our systems that are facing and the hard choices districts are going to make in the coming years, with the assumption that they're going to face more austerity, is to go back and say, okay, if we're looking at more tech-enhanced learning, more technologically mediated environments, what really is our vision for this? And if we're very clear about things like, if our vision element does include putting our young people at the center, then does our deployment and use of technology become an additive or is it extractive, right? Can we deploy the technology to create deeper conditions for which humans can connect? Or is this a race to the bottom and we're just simply giving you adaptive learning and saying, you know, we're doing the thing, right? We've met the future. So that's sort of how I see it. I'm not sure if that fully addresses the question.
There was one more very easy question, which was a request to see the slide before this one again.
Sure.
One more question, and I think we're hitting up against time. So how might other systems need to change, economic, political, et cetera, to fully realize a human-centered version? Are there signals in other systems that can provide us with this momentum? And before you answer, I want to say that as people ask questions, I am keeping track of them. So there are things we can explore in future webinars, on our website and web articles. So if you ask them and they don't get answered here, they don't just go off into oblivion. We are kind of keeping track of them.
So signs or indications that other systems are changing and or what are the ways that other systems might need to change? Wow, that's again, a really, really great one. And I want to kind of give the asterisk here that this is just my perspective on this. So looking at employment, moving away from sort of, again, extractive modes of employment and creating value to ones that are co-creative and actually additive. So looking at, you know, companies that commodify people versus companies that stand people up are a great example of that in terms of trying to begin to move the economy. If we stay within a capitalist system to one that can kind of more fully support the human condition. We look at the incoming administration's plan around investing billions, if not trillions of dollars into green infrastructure, we're starting to look at powerful plans and intentions from elites to prioritize the environment in ways that maybe we haven't before. So to think about environmental stewardship a little bit differently. So those are just two very small examples. Catherine, I don't know if you've got any ideas about this.
Big one, I would say all the systems need to be addressing structural racism in education, economy and politics and so forth, because that's a big impediment to being able to really change people's life outcomes for those who are affected by that.
Cool. And with that, I think we're actually at time. So thank you, everyone. It was an honor to spend this half hour with you, Catherine. It was an honor to share this work with you as well. So we will send out the slide deck when we're done. And just to give a short plug too, we're very happy to announce that earlier this week, we put out another publication highlighting future tensions on the horizon that education futures are facing that act as a great companion piece to this line of thinking.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us.